What would you do if you stepped outside your quiet country home one morning and found a German shepherd, starved, scarred, and tied to your gate like yesterday's trash? This isn't just a story of rescue. It's about redemption, healing, and a bond so powerful it transforms not just one life, but two. This emotional journey will take you from heartbreak to hope, as a forgotten dog learns to trust again, and a woman finds a new purpose in the most unexpected way. Before we dive into this incredible story, don't forget to hit that subscribe button to join our Pawprints Forever family. Like, share, and comment to tell us where in the world you're watching from. We love seeing our global community grow through the power of these stories. Now let's begin the journey that will melt your heart. The sun was just beginning to rise over the rolling hills of rural Tennessee when Martha Langley pulled her flannel robe tighter around her waist and stepped onto the front porch with a steaming mug of coffee. At 61, she found comfort in routines, sunrises, silence, and the gentle hum of life on her small farm just outside Cookeville. Her 2 goats were already bleating from their pen, and the hens were clucking softly in their coop behind the barn. The air was cool, crisp, and laced with the scent of pine and wood smoke. It was supposed to be an ordinary morning. But today something was different. Martha squinted toward the front gate, a simple metal structure at the end of her gravel driveway. Her heart skipped a beat. There was something... No, someone tied to it. A shape. A dog. Martha set her coffee down so fast it sloshed over the rim. She hurried down the steps and onto the path, her slippers crunching on frostbitten gravel. As she got closer, her breath caught in her throat. It was a German shepherd. Large, thin, and trembling. His fur was matted and dirty, patches of it missing from what looked like old sores or bites. His ribs were visible through his coat, and his paws were raw and cracked. Around his neck was a length of rope, crudely looped and knotted to the metal gate like someone had dumped him there in the dead of night and driven away without a second thought. He didn't bark, didn't growl. He just stared at her with hollow, amber eyes that looked far older than he should have been. Martha's throat tightened. "Oh, sweetheart," she whispered, stepping slowly closer. "What on earth happened to you?" The dog didn't move. He didn't flinch, didn't snarl. He simply stood there, still as a statue, as if waiting for permission to fall apart. Martha had lived a long life, filled with joy and heartbreak. She'd seen animals in rough shape before, but there was something about this dog, something in his silence, that struck her deeper than she could explain. She unlooped the rope gently from the gate, careful not to make any sudden moves. The shepherd barely reacted. She reached out, letting him sniff her hand. His nose twitched, then pressed against her fingers, faint and cold. "Let's get you inside, big guy," she murmured. He didn't resist. In fact, he followed her like he already knew this was the safest place he'd been in a long, long time. Back inside, Martha laid out an old quilt on the living room floor and filled a bowl with water. The dog drank slowly at first, then with growing thirst. She poured a second bowl, then warmed up some plain rice and chicken broth, the only thing in her fridge she figured his stomach might handle. While he ate, she dialed the number for Dr. Ramsey, the town's traveling vet. "Hey, Doc, I need a favor. Found a shepherd tied to my gate this morning. Looks bad. Can you swing by?" Ramsey, who had known Martha since her husband passed 5 years ago, promised to come by that afternoon. Once the dog had eaten, Martha sat beside him on the floor. He lay down with a heavy sigh, his body folding like he hadn't truly rested in weeks. She ran her hand gently down his back, over the jut of his spine, the notches of old scars. "You poor thing," she whispered. "You didn't deserve this." The dog didn't respond, but his breathing slowed, his eyes fluttering shut. He trusted her, already, and that made Martha cry. Dr. Ramsey arrived around noon in his old white pickup, lugging his worn vet bag and a warm smile. "Let's have a look at your new friend," he said. The shepherd was too weak to stand on his own, so they gently lifted him onto a folded blanket in the corner. Ramsay examined him with practiced hands and a furrowed brow. "He's about 4, maybe 5 years old. Male, no microchip," he said, shaking his head. "Looks like he's been starved, likely neglected for months. Could have been dumped from a fighting ring. Those old bite scars on his legs aren't from playing." Martha's stomach churned. "But he's not aggressive," Ramsay added, "which is a miracle, all things considered. Most dogs in his condition wouldn't let anyone near them." "He let me untie him without a fuss," Martha said. "Didn't even bark." Ramsay leaned in and checked the dog's eyes. "Because he's given up, but you found him just in time." He handed Martha a small bottle of antibiotics and a printed list of instructions. "Start with these. Keep feeding him slowly. Let him rest. And if you decide to keep him, I'll help with whatever you need." Martha nodded. "Thank you, Ramsay." As the vet left, the shepherd slowly lifted his head. Martha sat beside him again, her hand resting on his shoulder. "You're safe now, okay?" she whispered. "You can stay as long as you need." His ears twitched. Then, ever so gently, he licked her hand. The gesture was weak, but unmistakable. He understood. And in that moment, so did she. She wasn't just taking in a stray dog. She was beginning a story neither of them had expected, but one that would change them both forever. Martha named him Shadow. It felt right. He followed her from room to room with quiet steps, like a shadow, never straying too far from her side. He didn't bark. He didn't whine. He just watched, with those deep, amber eyes that seemed to hold every storm he'd ever weathered. The first few nights were quiet. Martha made him a soft bed near the fireplace using 2 thick quilts and a memory foam pillow she'd once used for her back. Shadow would settle into it cautiously, always facing the door, always alert, but somehow the flickering fire and Martha's presence helped him stay down longer each night. He didn't cry, but Martha swore in the stillness of midnight she could feel his pain settle over the room like a fog. The next morning she woke up early and found Shadow already sitting near the window, watching the sunrise as if he were waiting for something, or someone. "Still hoping someone's coming back for you?" she asked, pouring herself a cup of coffee. Shadow didn't move. Martha sighed. "They won't. But I did." She walked over, placed her hand gently on his head, and stood with him for a moment in the golden light. By the end of the first week, Shadow had started to move more. Slowly at first. His joints were stiff, his muscles frail from malnutrition, but his determination was undeniable. He sniffed the porch. He wandered to the edge of the yard. He even let out one soft woof when a deer darted through the brush beyond the fence. Martha smiled when she heard it. "Well, that's a voice," she called. "Don't worry, it'll come back in time." She began introducing him to the rest of the farm. He was gentle with the goats, curious but calm. The hens, always wary of newcomers, seemed to accept his slow-moving presence without complaint. And Martha's old tabby cat, Misty, after a few warning hisses, eventually curled up near him in the sun. Shadow seemed to understand the pace of the place. He didn't chase, didn't lunge, just existed, quietly, as if afraid to take up too much space, as if still waiting to be punished for breathing. But there were moments when the facade cracked. Late one evening, a thunderstorm rolled in, loud and sudden. The sky split open with lightning and thunder cracked like a whip. Martha was washing dishes when she heard it, a low, guttural whimper. She turned, heart breaking. Shadow had curled himself into a tight ball beneath the kitchen table, shaking violently. His ears were flat, tail tucked, eyes wild. She dropped the dish towel and rushed over, crouching beside him. "It's okay, baby," she whispered. "It's just thunder. You're safe now. I promise." He didn't look at her, just trembled. She stayed with him until the storm passed, her hand resting on his back, feeling each tremor through her fingertips. That night he didn't go to his bed by the fire. He lay beside hers. The next day Martha called Dr. Ramsey again. "I think he's got PTSD," she said. "He's terrified of storms, panics." Ramsey wasn't surprised. "Comes with trauma. Sounds like someone hurt him during one." Martha swallowed the lump in her throat. "How do I help him?" "Routine, patience, and love," Ramsey said. A calm voice, gentle hands. "You're doing everything right, Martha." She hung up and sat on the floor beside Shadow. "I'm not going anywhere," she whispered. "No matter what comes. You're not alone anymore." His tail thumped, just once. A sign, a spark. And Martha felt it like a vow. 2 weeks in, the first real shift happened. Martha had gone out to check on the goats, and when she returned to the porch, Shadow was there waiting, not lying down, but standing, ears perked, tail raised, eyes brighter. He trotted to meet her, his limp still present but less pronounced. And when she crouched down to greet him, he pressed his head firmly into her shoulder. A hug. A thank you. She wrapped her arms around him and whispered, "You're coming back to life, aren't you?" He licked her cheek gently. Yes, he was. But the peace wouldn't last forever. One night Martha heard something. A car engine, slowing just beyond the front gate. She peered through the curtains. A dusty black pickup truck, headlights off. Then it backed up and vanished down the road. She stepped onto the porch, heart racing. Shadow joined her moments later, ears alert, posture stiff. "Did you hear that too?" she asked softly. He didn't growl, didn't bark. But he stared into the darkness with a kind of stillness that chilled her to the bone. Someone had been watching. And Shadow might have known who it was. The black truck didn't return the next night, nor the one after. But the memory of it lingered, like the smell of smoke long after the fire has been put out. Martha found herself sleeping lighter, her ears trained on every creak of the house, every gust of wind brushing the windows. She reinforced the gate with a new chain and padlock and placed a motion-activated light above the porch, just in case. Shadow was on edge too. He'd started pacing near the front door every evening, his ears flicking at every unfamiliar sound. Martha noticed he rarely let himself fully relax. Even when lying down, his eyes stayed open longer, his breathing faster when night fell. He hadn't barked at the truck. But Martha remembered the way he'd stood there, stiff, still, and staring, as if a nightmare had just knocked on his front door. She wanted to believe it was just a stranger passing by. But deep down, she knew better. 3 days later, Martha headed into town for supplies. It was her first trip off the farm since Shadow arrived. She'd left him with the radio playing softly and a frozen peanut butter treat in his bed, hoping it would ease his anxiety. He watched her from the front window, tail still, eyes uncertain. "I'll be back before lunch," she promised. "You're okay." But when she returned 2 hours later, the front porch told a different story. The welcome mat was pushed aside, the metal gate was slightly ajar, and Shadow was nowhere in sight. Martha's heart dropped. She rushed inside, calling his name, nothing. Then, movement. From the barn. She sprinted across the yard, boots crunching hard on gravel, her breath coming in ragged gasps. And there he was. Shadow stood just inside the barn doors, his body low and tense. His tail wasn't tucked, but it wasn't wagging either, and beside him on the ground lay a shredded piece of cloth. Martha picked it up carefully. It was the sleeve of a denim jacket, and it reeked of gasoline. Someone had tried to enter the property, and Shadow had stopped them. She knelt and hugged him tightly, her voice shaking. You protected our home." He didn't move at first, but then slowly he rested his chin on her shoulder and let out a soft, low breath that sounded like relief. That night, Martha called Deputy Rayburn, the local sheriff's deputy. He listened calmly and took notes. "We've had some trespassing reports recently. Might be related." She hesitated. Could it have something to do with where he came from? The dogfighting? Could be, Rayburn admitted. Sometimes when people dump dogs like this and find out someone took them in, they want them back, either out of pride, fear of being exposed, or other motives. Martha felt bile rise in her throat. "Well, they're not getting him." Rayburn nodded. "Keep your doors locked. I'll increase patrols near your road." After she hung up, she walked back to the living room where Shadow now lay curled beside the fireplace. She knelt down and cupped his face in her hands. "No one is taking you away," she said firmly. "Not ever." His eyes locked onto hers, and this time there was something different behind them. Not fear, not pain, loyalty. Like he finally believed her. The next few weeks passed with a cautious peace. Shadow grew stronger. He began accompanying Martha on her walks around the property, moving with more confidence each day. His fur started to shine again. The limp in his back leg eased. He even learned how to open the screen door with his nose, a trick that earned him a laugh and a gentle scolding from Martha each time he used it to sneak back into the house. The storm inside him was slowly passing, but not without a few more flashes of lightning. One night, another thunderstorm swept across the hills. The thunder was deafening, rattling the windows and shaking the sky. Martha ran to check on Shadow, expecting to find him hiding again. But he wasn't under the table. He wasn't in the hallway or curled up near her bed. She found him standing on the porch, soaked from the rain, staring into the distance. Lightning lit the sky, and for a brief moment she saw it in his eyes. Not fear. Defiance. The storm no longer scared him, not because it had lost its power, but because he had found his... Later that week, a letter arrived. It was from a rescue organization in Nashville that worked with law enforcement. They'd been made aware of Shadow's case through the sheriff's office. Inside the envelope was a printed photo, blurry and old, but unmistakable. It was Shadow. Younger, thinner, standing behind a chain-link fence in what looked like a backwoods kennel. The note beneath the photo read, "We believe this dog was one of several used in an illegal fighting ring in Jackson County. The ring was busted 8 months ago. Several dogs were rescued, others disappeared. If this is your dog, please contact us. He's a survivor." Martha stared at the photo for a long time. Then she looked at Shadow, now curled up in the sun beside Misty, the old cat he had somehow charmed into friendship. A survivor, yes, but not just that, so much more. She folded the photo and placed it in a drawer. He wasn't just a survivor of something horrible. He was the beginning of something beautiful. By the time March melted into April, the land had shifted from dormant brown to vibrant green. Wildflowers began sprouting at the edges of Martha's fence line, and the wind carried the scent of blooming dogwood across the fields. With each passing day, Shadow's transformation became more undeniable, like watching an old soul slowly learn how to smile again. Martha began taking him for longer walks each morning, through the woods behind the property and up along the ridgeline trail where she used to walk with her late husband, Walter. At first, Shadow moved with caution, his body tense, checking every sound, but over time he relaxed. His tail, once rarely lifted, started to wag, shy at first, then with genuine happiness. He would trot ahead but always stop every few paces to look back, making sure she was still there. And she always was. One morning, Martha brought a small picnic basket with her on the trail. She spread a checkered blanket on the grass near the overlook where the valley opened below. Shadow sat beside her, his ears flicking in the wind. She passed him a few cooked chicken bites wrapped in foil. "I used to sit here with Walter," she said. "He loved this view. Said it reminded him to breathe slower, think deeper." Shadow crunched the food quietly. Martha took a sip of coffee from her thermos. "It's funny. I thought my days of being needed were behind me." Shadow looked up at her, his eyes soft. "But here you are," she whispered. "And here I am. We're both still here." She reached out and scratched behind his ears. He closed his eyes. That day, when they walked home, Shadow didn't look over his shoulder once. That weekend, Martha had visitors. Her son, Mark, and his two kids, Ali, age 6, and Lucas, age 9, arrived for a surprise spring break weekend visit. The children exploded out of the car with bags of snacks, soccer balls, and endless energy. Martha met them with open arms, smiling as they rushed up the porch steps. Shadow stood beside her, his body alert but not anxious. He hadn't been around kids before, at least not that she knew of, but she watched him carefully, ready to intervene if needed. "Ali, Lucas," she said gently. "This is Shadow. He's still getting used to people, so be slow and quiet, okay?" The kids nodded, their eyes wide with awe. Ali knelt down first, hand out. Shadow approached her, cautiously sniffing her fingers. Then, to everyone's surprise, he nudged his head into her chest. She giggled and wrapped her arms around him. Lucas followed next, and within minutes they were playing fetch on the lawn. Shadow didn't just tolerate it. He thrived in it. Martha stood on the porch, hands on her hips, watching in disbelief as the dog she once found tied to her gate now chased soccer balls and accepted belly rubs like he'd never known anything but love. Later that evening, Mark sat with her by the fire pit, the kids toasting marshmallows under a sky streaked with stars. "You've done something amazing here, Mum," he said, nodding toward Shadow. Martha sipped her wine. "I didn't do anything. He came here broken. But he decided to trust again. That was all him." Mark looked thoughtful. "You think someone's still looking for him? Not the bad people, I mean. Maybe someone out there lost him. Maybe he got away." Martha considered the idea. "I don't know," she said softly. "But sometimes the ones who get lost find exactly who they need." Over the next few days, the kids became inseparable from Shadow. Ali would dress him up in her floppy sun hat, and Lucas tried, unsuccessfully, to teach him to catch a frisbee. Shadow took it all in stride, gentle, patient, protective. But on the last day of their visit, something unexpected happened. They were packing the car when Ali burst into tears. "I don't want to leave Shadow." Martha bent down, hugging her tightly. "I know, sweetheart, but he'll be here next time." "But what if he forgets me?" Ali sniffled. Martha smiled. "He won't. Shadow never forgets the people he loves." Then, to prove her point, Shadow walked up and placed his paw gently in Ali's lap as she sat on the porch step. The little girl's tears stopped, and just like that she smiled again. That night the house was quiet again. Too quiet. Shadow lay by the fire, his eyes open, watching the door. "You missed them already?" Martha asked, kneeling beside him. He didn't move. She rested a hand on his side. "Me too." Then she looked into his eyes and saw something she hadn't before. A question. Not fear. Not sadness. But curiosity, like a door had opened in his mind. What else was out there? What more could life be? Shadow was healing. But maybe, just maybe, he was also ready. The next morning dawned with the kind of golden light that made everything feel new. Martha sat on the porch with her coffee as usual, watching Shadow roam the front yard with a confidence that would have been unthinkable just a month earlier. He sniffed the air, lifted his head to the breeze, and trotted along the fence line, not because he was guarding anymore, but because he finally belonged. Spring had turned her little farm into a haven of life and color. Birds chirped from every tree, The goats were loud and playful again. Even Misty, the cantankerous old tabby, had begun to warm up to Shadow, occasionally curling near him in the sun like she, too, had found peace in his quiet strength. Still, Martha couldn't shake the feeling that something was shifting in Shadow. There was a restlessness in his movement. Not fear, but energy. Like he was growing into something. Or preparing for something. Later that week, she decided to take him into town. It was a test, really, an experiment to see how far he'd come. Up until now, Shadow had only known her quiet farm and the gentle slopes of the woods. He hadn't faced traffic, strangers, or noise. She loaded him gently into the truck and drove the 15 minutes to downtown Cookeville. They parked by the farmers' market where the Saturday crowd bustled with life. Families, barking dogs, live bluegrass music echoing through the air. Shadow sat up in the back seat, ears alert, eyes wide. "You ready, big guy?" she asked, clipping on his harness and leash. He stepped down from the truck slowly, paws on the pavement, body low. But he didn't retreat. He stood tall beside her. And as they walked through the market, something incredible happened. People noticed him. Not because he was large or imposing, but because he was beautiful. Scarred, yes, but dignified, graceful, calm. Children asked to pet him. Vendors offered him treats. A retired couple even paused their conversation to say, "What a noble-looking shepherd. What's his story?" Martha smiled. "Oh, you wouldn't believe it if I told you," she said. "He found me." By the time they returned home, Shadow was tired, but not overwhelmed. He curled up under the shade tree and fell asleep almost immediately, twitching gently as if dreaming. Martha sat beside him with a book she never ended up reading. She just watched him sleep, amazed at how much trust now lived in his posture, his breath, his face. Shadow was no longer surviving. He was living, and so was she. 2 nights later, it happened. The black pickup truck returned. This time, it came at 2:14 a.m. Martha knew because she saw the numbers glowing on the microwave clock when Shadow's growl woke her. It was a sound she hadn't heard from him before. Low, serious, protective. She got up, pulled back the curtain and saw it. The same truck, parked just beyond the gate, engine idling. Then the headlights flicked on. And the driver stepped out. A man. Tall, wearing a hoodie and jeans, his face hidden under a ball cap. He walked up to the gate and rattled it, testing the chain. Shadow barked, loud, deep, once. Then he lunged forward and hit the screen door with a thud, startling Martha with his intensity. The man looked up, saw the light flip on inside the house and froze. Martha didn't hesitate. She opened the door just enough to yell, "You're on private property. The sheriff's already been here once. You want to try that again? I suggest you bring a warrant." The man didn't speak, just stared. Then he turned, walked back to the truck and drove off. But not before Shadow let out another thunderous bark that echoed across the yard like a warning shot. Not again. Not ever again. The next morning, Deputy Rayburn came by to take a report. He studied the tire tracks, noted the boot prints by the gate. "We'll keep a closer watch," he assured her. "But if that man comes back, don't wait. Call me right away." Martha nodded. "I'm not letting anyone take him, no matter what." Rayburn tipped his hat. "I don't think he'd let them either." Shadow stood a few feet away, watching the deputy, tail still, body relaxed but ready. That afternoon, something unexpected arrived in the mail. An envelope, no return address, just her name, handwritten in neat script. Inside was a single photograph. It showed a younger Shadow, though back then he wasn't called that, tied to a fence post, eyes wide with fear. Behind him stood the same man from the gate, holding the rope like a leash. On the back of the photo in faded blue ink was a single word. Reaper. Martha stared at it for a long time. She turned it over again. Then she folded it in half and threw it in the fire. That night she sat beside Shadow, brushing his coat while he lay beside her on the porch swing. "You were never Reaper," she said quietly. "Your shadow. My shadow." He leaned his weight gently into her side. And for the first time in weeks, she allowed herself to exhale fully. No matter who he'd been, this was who he was now. Hers. The days that followed brought calm, as if the earth itself were helping Martha and Shadow breathe again. Whatever message the man in the truck had tried to send with that photograph, it didn't land the way he'd hoped. If his goal was fear, he failed. If it was intimidation, he'd miscalculated, because Shadow wasn't that broken animal anymore. And Martha? She'd spent her lifetime loving hard, surviving harder. She'd buried her parents, her husband, and her only sister. What frightened her once didn't anymore, not when there was someone depending on her. She was no longer just a woman with a quiet farm. She was a line in the sand. Shadow had stopped checking the window at night. Where he once paced or curled nervously under furniture, he now laid stretched out in the hallway, positioned just between Martha's room and the front door. Like a sentinel, like a promise. And she trusted him with her life. By the middle of April, Shadow's story had spread beyond Cookville. Martha hadn't intended it. But one day, at the farmer's market, a local college student named Brianna had snapped a photo of Shadow sitting stoically beside a toddler who had plopped onto the ground and leaned against his side without warning. Shadow hadn't flinched. He just sat there, solid and still, his eyes focused on the crowd, but his presence calm and safe. Brianna had posted the photo with the caption, "This is Shadow. He used to be tied to a gate and left to die. Now he's the gentlest soul at the market. We don't deserve dogs." The post went viral. Within 48 hours, thousands of people had shared it. Comments poured in from around the country. "I needed this today. Whoever saved him, thank you. I hope the people who hurt him see this and know he's loved now. Dogs like Shadow make the world better." Martha had never used social media, but Brianna helped her set up a page called Shadow's Journey, where she could put updates, pictures, and milestones. At first she was shy about it, but as the story grew, so did the messages of support. She received packages, letters, handmade collars, a painting from a 10-year-old girl in Montana who said, "Shadow makes me believe in good things again." Martha hung it by the kitchen door. Shadow sniffed it once and wagged his tail, but with the growing attention came something else. Recognition. One day she received a message forwarded by Brianna. It was from a woman named Lisa Jenkins in Georgia. "I think I knew Shadow, or Reaper, as he was once called. My brother was involved in that ring. I tried to shut it down years ago, but no one would listen. When the feds finally raided the place, they didn't get all the dogs. I thought about that shepherd every day. I'm so glad he's alive. I'm so sorry I couldn't save him sooner." Martha read the message 3 times, her hand over her mouth. Then she wrote back, "You don't have to carry the guilt anymore. He's safe now, and he's home." Spring melted into early summer. Martha and Shadow found their days filled with simple joys: sunrise walks to the creek, lazy afternoons under the oak tree, evenings on the porch swing where fireflies blinked like stardust. Shadow had found his rhythm. He could now walk the property without a leash, never straying far. He'd greet the goats in the morning, chase butterflies with surprising agility, and even tolerate baths in the galvanized tub out back, though he always gave her a look of betrayal until he was dried off with warm towels. He was no longer just Martha's protector. He was her partner, her companion, her peace. Then came the letter. This one, unlike the anonymous photo, had a return address, a name she recognized. Kurt Maddox, the man from the photograph. The one who'd once tied Shadow to that gate and drove off like he was tossing out trash. The letter was written in short, tense lines. I know you have my dog. I want him back. He's mine. You have no right to keep him. You're not saving him. You're stealing from me. Return what's mine before things get ugly. K. Maddox. Martha stared at the paper for a long time. Her hands didn't shake. Her jaw didn't clench. She simply folded the letter and walked outside. Shadow was lying in the sun, paws tucked under him, watching the clouds drift by. She knelt down beside him, ran her fingers through his fur and whispered, You're not his. You never were. You're yours. And now you're mine too. He pressed his head into her chest. Not fearfully, not like a dog seeking protection, but like a friend saying thank you. That night, Martha wrote her own letter, but not to Kurt. She mailed it to the sheriff, with copies of the photo, the original message, and Kurt's new threat. She included a simple note. This man hurt an animal and thinks he can do it again. I don't scare easy, but I believe in justice. I believe in the law. If he comes for my dog, he won't find the woman who opened her gate. He'll find the woman who closed it and locked it for good. Martha Langley. Then she locked the gate. For the first time since Walter died, she felt truly safe. Not because danger was gone, but because she was ready, and she had a dog beside her who would never let the darkness in again. The sheriff called her the next morning. Got your letter, Martha? Deputy Rayburn said, his voice calm but resolute. We've dealt with Maddox before. He's a bad piece of work. I've already forwarded this to the State Cruelty Division. If he sets foot on your property again, we'll charge him with trespassing, and more if we can prove prior abuse. Martha nodded, gripping the phone tighter. I just want to keep my dog safe. You're doing more than that, Rayburn replied. You're standing up for every animal who's ever been thrown away, and we'll back you all the way. After she hung up, Martha stepped out onto the porch. The morning sun had started to rise above the treetops, casting everything in a warm, hopeful glow. Shadow was sitting in his usual spot under the oak tree, calmly watching the pasture like a king surveying his land. She walked toward him with slow, steady steps, and when she reached him, she crouched down and held his face in her hands. We're not afraid, she said softly. Not anymore. He looked into her eyes and gently pressed his forehead to hers. And in that moment she knew no one was taking him from her. Over the next few weeks, life returned to its gentle rhythm. Martha didn't let her guard down completely, but she didn't live in fear either. Shadow seemed to sense the shift too. He still patrolled the yard in the mornings, still checked the gate each night before lying down. But there was more play in him now. More light. He had started chasing butterflies again, barking softly at squirrels and bringing Martha sticks like trophies after each walk. One afternoon, as she hung laundry on the line, he dropped a pine cone at her feet and sat down proudly. You silly boy, she laughed. That's not how fetch works. But he just wagged his tail and stared at her with an unmistakable sparkle in his eye. She tossed it. He raced off like a pup half his age. Shadow's social media presence had exploded. Shadow's journey had grown to over 100,000 followers, and Martha received letters and emails from around the world. Veterans wrote about how his courage gave them hope. Survivors of abuse said his healing made them believe they could too. Children sent crayon drawings of Shadow wearing superhero capes. It overwhelmed her at times. She wasn't used to attention. But then she remembered. This wasn't about fame. It was about faith. The kind that returned in quiet moments. The kind that rose up from rock bottom and whispered, "Keep going." She kept posting his progress, his playfulness, his quiet strength. And one day, she posted a video of something she hadn't expected. Shadow had found his voice. It happened in the backyard. A neighbor's dog barked, and Shadow, standing tall by the fence, raised his head and let out a deep, clear bark, loud, proud, and unshaken. He wasn't warning. He was speaking. Martha caught it on camera, tears rolling down her cheeks as she whispered, "That's it, boy. That's your voice. You got it back." The video went viral. Over 3 million views in less than a week. Shadow had gone from a tied-up ghost to a living legend of hope. But not all responses were kind. Amid the outpouring of support, there was one message that chilled her. "He was mine first. I'm coming to get what's mine. You can't hide behind the internet forever. KM." She didn't reply. She didn't need to. Instead, she sent it to Deputy Rayburn, who immediately filed it as a direct threat. "You're not alone, Martha," he told her. "We've got a patrol car checking your road every night. And if Maddox comes near you, we'll have him arrested. Count on it." Martha hung up, hands trembling, but not from fear. From fury. From the deep, burning fire of a woman who had lost too much and would not lose again. She walked into the living room where Shadow sat near the fireplace, his head rising when he saw her. "Come on, boy," she said. "Let's go make sure the gate's locked." He stood, not as a follower, but as a partner. As they stepped outside together, the wind rustled through the trees and birds chirped in the canopy above. The world was watching. But more importantly, Shadow was watching. And no one, not man nor memory, was ever going to chain him again. Summer came in full swing, bringing long, golden days and warm, velvet nights. The farm buzzed with life, goats bleating in the barn, chickens pecking curiously in the yard, bees humming over wildflowers. Martha's vegetable garden thrived, and the mornings were filled with birdsong and the soft thump of Shadow's paws as he trotted beside her on their daily walks. It was peace. Earned, hard-won peace, but peace that still kept one eye open. The sheriff's office had increased patrols near her road. Maddox hadn't resurfaced in person, but the threat of him still loomed like a dark cloud hovering just out of sight. Despite the law on her side, Martha remained alert. A bat was now tucked beside the front door. Her phone was fully charged and always nearby. And Shadow, he was sharper than ever. No longer frightened by every noise, but keenly aware of changes in the wind, unusual sounds, or unfamiliar scents. His instincts had shifted from self-preservation to protection. He wasn't just a survivor. He was home's guardian now. One morning, as the sun burned off a thick layer of mist over the pasture, Martha received a visitor. A dusty SUV pulled up outside the gate. The woman who stepped out was middle-aged, modestly dressed, and visibly nervous. She held a manila folder clutched to her chest and hesitated at the gate before calling out, "Hello?" Shadow was already on the porch, standing beside Martha, alert but not aggressive. Martha descended the steps slowly, hand brushing Shadow's head as she passed. "Can I help you?" she asked. The woman nodded. "My name is Lisa Jenkins. I think we emailed a few months ago." Martha blinked. "The woman from Georgia?" "Yes." Lisa stepped closer, carefully keeping her hands in view. "I know this is forward, I had to meet him, had to see for myself that he was real, that he was okay." Martha studied her carefully, then opened the gate and motioned her in. "Come on up. He'll let me know if something's wrong." Lisa walked up the gravel path slowly, her eyes locked on Shadow. He watched her too, quiet, cautious. When she reached the porch, she crouched down and opened the folder. Inside were photos, old ones, blurry shots of dogs in cages tied up in fields, a few in makeshift kennels with scars and missing fur. She pointed to one photo in particular, a younger Shadow. He was thinner. His eyes looked wild, panicked, but unmistakably him. "I took that photo the night I ran away from my brother's place," Lisa whispered. "I knew what he was doing. I tried to stop him, but nobody believed me. Not until the feds came. And by then, Shadow was gone." Martha stared at the photo, her heart aching. "He found his way here," she said softly, "tied to my gate, like someone dumped him one last time." Lisa nodded, tears in her eyes. "And you saved him?" "No," Martha corrected. "He saved me." They talked for an hour on the porch. Lisa told her about growing up in that house, about the horrors she'd witnessed, about the dogs that didn't make it, and the ones she still dreamed about. "He was the only one that didn't break," she said. "Even when they starved him, even when they chained him up for days, he never bit anyone. He just watched, waited, like he was holding out for someone." Martha looked at Shadow, now lying calmly at her feet. He was. Before Lisa left, she knelt beside Shadow, tears streaking down her face. "I'm so sorry," she whispered, not daring to touch him. "You didn't deserve any of it." And then, slowly, carefully, Shadow leaned forward and touched his nose to her hand. Lisa gasped and broke down. That night, as the stars blinked into the summer sky and crickets began their nightly chorus, Martha sat on the porch swing with Shadow resting his head on her lap. "I think you needed that," she said, running her fingers through his fur. "Closure." He sighed, a long, slow breath that sounded like something finally being released. "I think I needed it too." They sat like that for a long time, listening to the wind move through the trees, the rustle of leaves, the crackle of the porch light. Then Martha stood and walked to the edge of the steps, gazing out across her land. She had almost forgotten what it meant to feel safe, to feel seen. And now, with every breath of this summer air, she remembered it again. Shadow came up beside her and sat down, brushing his side against her leg. Together, they looked out into the dark. Not afraid. Not anymore. A few weeks later, the sun blazed hotter than usual for early June, and Martha found herself rising earlier each morning to beat the heat. Shadow had adapted to the seasonal change with ease, preferring his midday naps under the oak tree, belly to the dirt, ears twitching lazily at flies. But something else had changed too. He was smiling now. Not in the wag-your-tail panting kind of way, but in that soft, gentle lift of the corners of his mouth. A relaxed face, a glint in his eyes. A dog who no longer expected to be hurt when a hand reached out to touch him. A dog who had finally realized this was home. Martha watched it unfold like magic. One morning he trotted toward her with a stick in his mouth. Not one she had thrown, not part of a game. Just a gift. Something he'd found and decided to share. She laughed so hard she had to sit on the porch step, tears of joy running down her face. "Is that for me?" She chuckled. "Well, aren't you just the most generous soul?" He dropped it at her feet and nudged it closer. "I guess that's a thank you, huh?" And in her heart, she knew. Yes, that's exactly what it was. The story of Shadow had reached far beyond their small town by now. People were mailing care packages, sending cards, even requesting meet and greets, though Martha kept most of those at bay. She didn't want him turned into a sideshow. He was a life, not a legend. Still, she allowed one or two quiet interviews with local papers and radio stations. And then came the call from the Regional Humane Society. "We'd like to honor you," said the woman on the phone, warm-voiced and excited. "Both you and Shadow. We host an annual Hearts Reclaimed event spotlighting extraordinary stories of rescued animals and their caretakers. Shadow's story has given hope to so many. We want to give back." Martha was hesitant. The idea of standing in front of a crowd was daunting, but something about it stirred her. "Can I bring Shadow with me?" "Absolutely," the woman said. "He's the guest of honor." Martha looked down at the dog curled at her feet, breathing deeply in a rare afternoon nap. "You're going to be famous, you know," she murmured. He let out a soft grunt of a dream. The event was held 2 towns over in a small outdoor amphitheater. It was warm that afternoon but shaded, and a gentle breeze fluttered through the trees overhead. The crowd was modest but sincere. Families, rescue workers, dog lovers of all kinds. There were therapy dogs, service dogs, and dogs who had come from brutal beginnings now, resting peacefully in the laps of the humans who'd saved them. Martha sat beside Shadow at the edge of the stage, feeling more like a proud mother than an honoree. When her name was called, she walked up slowly, a bit unsteady on her feet, with Shadow by her side, perfectly in step. The applause was warm, respectful. The host, a kind woman in her 40s, introduced her. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is Martha Langley and her dog Shadow. Once abandoned, abused, and left tied to a gate, Shadow now stands as a symbol of what love, patience, and a second chance can do. In saving him, Martha did more than give a dog a home. She gave all of us a reason to believe again." Martha was handed a plaque that read, "For restoring what was lost, courage, compassion, and a life reclaimed." Her voice trembled when she spoke, but it never faltered. "I didn't find Shadow," she said. "He found me. I think he was looking for someone who wouldn't give up on him, and the truth is, I was looking for someone too." She looked down at him. "And I found him." After the event, people lined up just to pet Shadow. He handled it all like a seasoned veteran, gentle, still, but responsive. He let a toddler hug him around the neck. He licked an elderly woman's hand. And when a teenage boy with anxiety leaned against him without a word, Shadow didn't flinch. He just pressed his weight into the boy's side, grounding him. That night, back at home, Martha placed the plaque on the mantel beside a photo of her late husband. She poured herself a glass of sweet tea and sat on the porch swing. Shadow curled beside her. "Can you believe it?" she whispered. "A dog who was once forgotten, now a symbol of hope." He blinked slowly and rested his head in her lap. "And the best part is," she added, "you don't even care about any of that. You just wanted a place to belong." She stroked his head and looked up at the stars. "Well, you found it, and I found you." The wind whispered through the trees. The goats stirred in the barn. But nothing broke the stillness between them. Because sometimes peace doesn't come with silence. It comes with understanding. And in that moment, on that swing, beneath a sky full of old light, they understood everything. It was a week after the ceremony when the letter arrived. Not an email. Not a message through social media. But a physical envelope, handwritten in smudged black ink, left, again, without a return address. Martha found it tucked behind her mailbox just after her morning walk with Shadow. He had sniffed the post with a low rumble in his chest before she noticed anything unusual. She opened it slowly, her fingers steady even as her stomach tightened. Inside was a single sheet of paper. No threats this time, just 4 words. "He was mine first." Martha stared at it, unmoved. She folded the paper, walked back into the house, and tossed it straight into the fireplace. As the flames consumed it, she turned to Shadow, who stood silently in the doorway watching her. "Let him watch," she said calmly. "Let him see what a real life looks like. He lost you the day he tried to break you. He doesn't own anything but regret." Shadow didn't respond, of course. But he turned from the fire, walked over to his favorite rug, and lay down like a king in his castle. He didn't care about the past. He had outgrown it. By midsummer, the heat was thick, and the creek on the edge of Martha's property became a daily stop. Shadow would wade into the shallow end, his reflection rippling across the water as he cooled his paws and snapped lazily at dragonflies. It was here that Martha realized something. Shadow had stopped checking the perimeter. He wasn't looking for threats anymore. He wasn't waiting for someone to come back. He was simply present, living, loving, home. She sat on a rock near the edge of the creek, watching him paddle softly in the water. "You know," she said aloud, "for a dog that was once called Reaper, you sure turned out to be more of a healer." He looked back at her, ears perked. She smiled. "That name never fit you. You were never meant to hurt. You were meant to mend." That night, a thunderstorm rolled in again. But it was different this time. Martha woke to the soft roll of thunder in the distance and the gentle tapping of rain on her window. She looked beside her bed. Shadow wasn't hiding. He wasn't curled in the hallway or under the kitchen table. He was at the window, watching. She rose quietly and joined him. He stood tall, calm, ears forward, just observing. And then he wagged his tail, not nervously, but as if to say, "It's just a storm now, that's all." In the weeks that followed, Martha and Shadow slipped into a new rhythm. Evenings on the porch swing, long walks before sunset, visitors who came to see the miracle dog and left feeling lighter, children who learned gentleness through his patience, veterans who sat with him in silence and felt something loosen in their chests. Shadow wasn't just hers anymore. He was everyone's, a symbol of what could be reclaimed, of what could be reborn. Then came the last visit. It was Lisa again. She returned with news. "Maddox is in custody," she said. "They finally got him. He crossed into Kentucky with 3 underweight dogs in the back of his truck. He's not getting out this time." Martha didn't react at first, then she nodded. "Good." Lisa glanced down at Shadow. "He won." Martha smiled. "He chose to win. That's the difference." That night, Martha lit a candle on the porch, not for mourning, for celebration. She poured a glass of wine. Shadow lay beside her, his head resting on her foot like he always did. "We did it," she whispered. "You're free now." He exhaled, content, eyes half closed. And for the first time in a long, long time, Martha let herself cry. Not from grief, but from peace, because this wasn't just a happy ending. It was a new beginning, for both of them. From the moment Shadow was left tied to a gate, his story could have ended in silence and sorrow, but because of one woman's open heart and unwavering courage, it became something else entirely, a journey of resilience, loyalty, and the kind of love that doesn't ask for anything in return. Shadow didn't just survive, he healed, and in doing so, he gave healing to everyone who crossed his path. If this story touched your soul, please like, share, and subscribe to Pawprints Forever for more powerful, true stories of animals who were lost, and then found in the hearts of humans who refused to give up. We'd love to hear from you. Which part of Shadow's story moved you the most? And don't forget to tell us where you're listening from in the comments below. Until next time, remember, sometimes the ones left behind become the ones who lead us home.